I just watched this interview here with Eddie Hearn and Kalle Sauerland talking about the future for Filip Hrgovic. They were throwing names about like Andy Ruiz, Luis Ortiz, Martin Bakole, and they were saying it's basically not their fault that nobody has stepped up to the plate and fought Filip Hrgovic thus far in terms of worthy opponents, somebody that could fight him in a final eliminator. Kalle Sauerland talked about the fact that they had a purse bid for the Michael Hunter fight. Well, I'm here to tell you that the reason that Michael Hunter didn't go through with that fight is because he thought the money wasn't good enough to be fighting somebody as dangerous as Filip Hrgovic. Now, I'm not giving Michael Hunter a pass, okay? I think it was terribly disappointing that he decided to turn that fight down because he said he would fight these guys for free. So Michael Hunter didn't live up to his word. But ultimately, the reason why he passed on that is because the money, and I think he was supposed to get something like 400 grand, 500 grand, correct me if I'm wrong. I think the purse bid in the end was about 600 grand. Matchroom won it, or whoever it was, Matchroom in conjunction with Sauerland. It was about 600 grand or something like that. And Hunter was about to get 400 grand, correct me if it was well under $1 million. Let's just put it that way. Well under. Michael Hunter is not going to fight, and not just Michael Hunter, many other fighters who have aspirations to become world heavyweight champions, they're not going to fight Filip Hrgovic for, under $1 million probably. Or they'd at least need to be getting close to $1 million. $700,000, $800,000, $900,000 rather than $400,000. So as much as Eddie Hearn and Kalle Sauerland say it's not their fault, well, it is their fault. Because if you pay enough money, the opponents will step up and fight. It's that simple. Yeah, people were willing to step in the ring with George Foreman back in the days, Mike Tyson back in the days, because they got paid enough money. So if you pay enough money, they'll definitely fight Filip Hrgovic. He's not as intimidating as the two heavyweights I just mentioned. So let's see if these guys are actually willing. See, the thing about Eddie Hearn, and he said this in the past, he is not as willing as certain other promoters, and Frank Warren, admittedly, is one of them. He's not as willing to take a loss on a show as certain people are. Yeah, he wants to make a profit every single time. He has taken losses on shows. He's admitted that himself, but he doesn't like to do it. Whereas with Frank Warren, I've seen interviews with him in the past where he says taking a loss on a show is like an investment at times, because you have a certain fighter and you need to get him a certain caliber of opponent. And so you take a loss on a show and you recoup it on subsequent shows, because if your guy wins, his status and his commercial value rises. You see? That's the situation with Hrgovic. They're going to need to take a loss on a show. It's like an investment. Pay the money now to bring a Michael Hunter in, or an Andy Ruiz, or Luis Ortiz, whoever it is. Pay the right money. And then if Filip Hrgovic is able to dispatch of those guys in the way that you think he will, then his stock is going to rise. And the next time you get him out for a fight, you're going to make your money back. You're going to recoup what you lost in the previous fight. So again, there's no guarantee it will work out that way. Perhaps Filip Hrgovic loses, all right? Perhaps he doesn't look good. But that is what it's going to take to actually get past this stumbling block. And here's me talking about Filip Hrgovic needing to get a move on, because I think he's 28 or 29 now. Eddie Hearn said the same thing. Said Hrgovic is in his prime right now, needs to get a move on. Now, there was somebody in the comment section of the previous video I did about Filip Hrgovic, and he said, Hrgovic is only young for a heavyweight. Most of them don't mature until they're in their 30s, and many of them are still viable contenders in their late 30s. Well, I actually mentioned that in that video. I don't know whether this person watched the video all the way through or listened properly. But at the same time as you can give examples of heavyweights that have still been viable contenders in their late 30s, I can name you several heavyweights who were not viable contenders in their late 30s. Was Mike Tyson a viable contender in his late 30s? Mike Tyson was washed up by his late 30s. How old was he when he fought Lennox Lewis? 36? Lewis was 37, I think, at the time, around those ages. So that's his mid-30s and he was totally washed up. By the time he was in his late 30s, forget about it. He was losing to Danny Williams and Kevin McBride. That's where Mike Tyson was at in his late 30s. Joe Frazier, same thing. He was done by his late 30s. Razor Ruddock, done by his late 30s. Sometimes even earlier than that. Riddick Bowe was done by his late 20s, finished. Okay, Jorge Luis Gonzalez back in the days, Cuban, great amateur background. By the time he was in his late 30s, I think even mid-30s, he was completely finished, washed up. I could go on. There are many, many other examples I could give you of heavyweights whose prime was in their 20s, early 30s. By the time they're in their mid-30s and definitely late 30s, they're completely finished. Therefore, you can't just assume that Filip Hrgovic is going to have this Indian summer type career where, oh, time is no object and, you know, let him take years and years and he'll get there by the time he's 35, 36 and he'll be perfectly fine. He'll be in his prime then. Who's to say he's going to be in his prime then? Plenty of heavyweights' prime is much earlier than that. So don't get caught up on the exceptions rather than the rule. Yeah, Muhammad Ali's prime was in his 20s. Mike Tyson's prime was in his early 20s. Yeah, so don't make assumptions about how far somebody's prime can stretch. And when you look at the Klitschko's, for example, yeah, the Klitschko's, particularly Vladimir Klitschko, he really came into his own, I want to say in his mid-30s. But there's a combination of factors that contribute to why he came into his own in his mid-30s. And one of those factors is the competition was weak during most of Vladimir Klitschko's title reign, the 10-year title reign that he went on. That was his second title reign, right? Yeah. Because lost to Ross Purity, but he wasn't a champion then, was he? Was that a title? I don't think it was. It's the Corey Sanders fight where he had a world title, lost that, WBO. Then he came back, fought Lamont Brewster. Wasn't champion then, was he? Did he try to? I can't remember how it went now. It's so long ago. Maybe you guys can fill me in the comments. But either way, you know what I'm talking about. The long 10-year title run that he was on. For the majority of that, the opposition was poor. I mean, he was fighting people like Leopai. He was fighting people like Chigaev, who's not a bad heavyweight, but he was very overweight and really just a fat cruiserweight. He was fighting, Marius Wack. He was fighting Tony Thompson twice. He was fighting Eddie Chambers. The level of opposition that he was facing wasn't like the guys that are around now. Yeah. It wasn't like the Tyson Furies and the Anthony Joshuas, even the Dylan Whites. That wasn't the level of opposition that Klitschko was fighting for the most part. Obviously, he did fight Povetkin, but that was a horrible, horrible, horrible fight where really Vladimir Klitschko should have been disqualified for all the leaning and holding he was doing, far in excess of anything I've ever seen before in a boxing ring. People always want to bring up Lennox Lewis and Muhammad Ali. What Vladimir Klitschko did in that Povetkin fight, I have never seen anything like that in a World Heavyweight Championship fight where a guy didn't get disqualified as a result. The closest thing I've seen to that was Henry Akinwande against Lennox Lewis, and Akinwande rightfully did get disqualified. There's a video which is still up on YouTube called Klitschko Illegal Tactics. If you are in any doubt that Vladimir Klitschko-Povetkin fight was one of the most egregious examples of foul play in a boxing ring with regards to not just excessive holding, but leaning down and even throwing the opponent around. If you're in any doubt about that, go and watch the video called Klitschko Illegal Tactics. Okay? I think it might have shocking in the title as well. Go and watch that video and then get back to me. All right? There's no Lennox Lewis fight where Lewis even comes close to doing that amount of holding and leaning. Not even close. Nor a Muhammad Ali fight. Leaning all over the guy's back so your feet are leaving the floor. That's crazy. Just in the first round alone, what Vladimir Klitschko does is just insane against Povetkin. So I don't really give him too much credit for that Povetkin win because he basically fouled his way to victory. Then he fought David Haye. How good was David Haye really at heavyweight? Exciting, good cruiserweight, but his best win at heavyweight was Derek Chisora. What else did he do? You know? So really and truly, Vladimir Klitschko, yeah, he went on until he was in his late 30s eventually. But the opposition wasn't amazing, was it? You know? So you have to take that into account as well. But Filip Hrgovic, Like I say, he's not Vladimir Klitschko. We don't know how good he is. It's a much more competitive era. You can't rest on your laurels and think, oh, he's got plenty of time. He's 29 and he probably won't reach his prime till he's 35, 36. You can't assume that. Plenty of heavyweights are finished by that age. So anyway, let's see what happens here. The names they mentioned in Andy Ruiz and Luis Ortiz, yeah, great. If they can get him in there with either of those guys or anybody else in the IBF top 10. Good stuff. I think they also mentioned Zhang, the Chinese heavyweight who says he's up for the fight. That is probably more realistic. You know, I don't rate Zhang based upon what I've seen of him. Didn't he fight Jerry Forrest? Was it Jerry Forrest he fought and had a really difficult fight, nearly got knocked out? So I don't rate that Zhang guy. Perhaps that's who Filip Hrgovic will end up fighting. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you've seen this interview, give me your thoughts on it. Eddie Hearn and Sauerland. And it's interesting watching the dynamic between these two now. Just from a, soap opera perspective, because of the fact they're now competitors. They're now rivals. Yeah? For the longest time, they've been working together. And I guess they will still be working together. But they'll also be working as rivals. I don't want to say against each other necessarily, but in some instances that might be the case. Sauerland now works with Wasserman, and they have a deal on Sky Sports. And I'll be making other videos covering some of the fighters that they've signed. In this interview here, Eddie Hearn couldn't stop staring at Kalle Sauerland. I don't know whether it's because of Kalle's weird twitches that he's so famous for, his lizard tongue and all that, or whether it's because Eddie Hearn's eyes are burning with the competitive spirit looking at Kalle now, because Kalle's maybe now stepping on his toes a little bit. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think about it all in the comments below. It's all fun and games. We like to see Eddie Hearn have some competition. It was just Frank Warren, although Eddie Hearn says these guys are not competition for me. It was just Frank Warren. Now it's Kalle Sauerland as well, who, a similar age to Eddie, does understand the market a lot better than somebody like a Frank Warren. When I say understand the market, understands the modern market, the modern boxing fan, better than somebody like a Frank Warren. So, yeah, be interesting to see how their relationship develops over the next few years. The more successful Kalle Sauerland is, Wasserman are on Sky, could that signal a souring of the relationship with Eddie Hearn? Look, Eddie Hearn comes across as somebody who is business-minded enough and sensible enough not to allow things to deteriorate, okay? He's seen the likes of Bob Arum, Frank Warren, and all these other guys who are very bitter in boxing, and he's always said that he doesn't want to be like that. He wants to be able to be reasonable and, deal with people. So let's see if that holds up with regards to Kalle Sauerland. At the moment, of course, Kalle Sauerland, Wasserman, they don't have a stable that can remotely rival what Eddie Hearn has. And interestingly, by the way, this is a final point in this video. Since Kalle is now with Sky, right? He's got this deal. Will they be looking to take Hrgovic over to Sky and away from Matchroom DAZN? Because again, Hrgovic has a co-promotional deal at the moment with Matchroom DAZN along with, I guess, Sauerland or Wasserman. Will they be looking when that runs out to then take him over to Sky? I have to imagine they probably will. And there may be other fighters that are co-promoted by Eddie Hearn where Sauerland will be looking to do the same thing. So we'll see how the situation develops. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Come and join me on Patreon and access my weekly no-holds-barred, censorship-free podcast where we lift the lid on a wide range of controversial topics. It's not mainstream friendly, it's not politically correct, but that's the whole point. We dare to stand as a beacon of reason against an army of insanity. Just head on over to my Patreon page and select the tier called Hatman Hot Topics. You'll gain access to a minimum of 2 hours of exclusive content every single week, including podcasts, videos, interviews, live stream Q&A sessions, as well as my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. Not to mention a vast back catalog of hundreds of hours of previous episodes. You can listen via the Patreon app, with the option to download in high quality MP3. We've also got a Discord server where you can come and chat and hang out with myself and other members. There's no contract, no commitment, and you can cancel at any time. So come and join our community of free and critical thinkers by signing up with me here on Patreon today.